Good morning, everybody. Good morning. Yeah, there's a lot of people out there today. Normally I get a first look, but then I've been having to sit here, and then you sounded great this morning singing. My name is Zach. I'm the worship and outreach minister here. Normally I'm leading the worship, but today Tim thought he'd let you kind of suffer for me a little bit today, suffer for him a little bit today. But hey, I really just want to say thanks to Tim, not only for letting me speak, letting all of our staff get a chance to speak, but also taking the reins, leading worship, and he did a great job, is doing a great job, so thank you, Tim. Hey, not every preacher can do that, so we're really blessed here at Westside. I've heard some preachers sing, and let me tell you, I'm excited about this new series, Kingdom Families, that we started last week. Tim mentioned that families are the building blocks of the kingdom, and we at Westside, if you haven't noticed yet, have been talking about discipleship for a couple of years now, and really trying to make it on the forefront of what we do here. And that's just biblical, because Jesus, the last thing he said on earth before he left to his disciples was, go and make more of them, right? Go out and make disciples. And I got to believe that if I'm knowing that it's the last thing I'm going to say on earth to a group of people, it's going to be pretty important, right? And so we understand here at Westside that making disciples is important. And as Tim mentioned last week, one of the best ways to do that is through our families and through our children. Another great thing I love is that church family, right? Some of us maybe don't have great relationships with our nuclear families or our extended families. But the one great thing about church family is church is the family you choose. It's not the family you're born with. It's not the family you just have to deal with or have to see at holidays and maybe hope to ignore, right? Church is the family we choose. We choose to come here together and become a part of this family. And so while some of the context of this message today will be within the family, within our children, it is at its core a message about discipleship. And so when I say kids, I mean disciples. And when I say disciples, I mean kids, and they're interchangeable. So don't tune me out if you don't have any kids, or you're not going to have any kids, or you don't want to have any more kids, or whatever. But we're talking about discipleship today, and I think this can kind of speak to everybody. But having said that, I want to tell you a story about my kids. So this is Joshua. Everybody say, aw, okay, that's not him. That's him. Oh, ain't he cute? So we had his 8th birthday party on Friday, and we had a Nerf war, and man, let me just tell you, it's really fun to shoot children with Nerf guns. You get to take out a lot of anger that maybe you wouldn't normally get to. Enoch Brooks, is he in here? No. Enoch was hiding under this big box that we had, and a couple of the adults went and picked up the box, and Enoch came running towards me, and I shot him right between the eyes, and I felt really bad, but he handled it really well, so I didn't feel that bad. Anyway, but so Joshua's a great kid. He's incredibly funny. He brings a lot of life to any room that he's in. He loves Harry Potter. He loves the Baltimore Ravens for some reason. We don't really know, but he does. He loves to play. He loves to read. He brings life to any room that he's in. He's also incredibly intelligent. If you don't believe me, just ask his grandparents, okay? They'll tell you the truth. No, really, my dad, growing up, he said, son, you're the dumbest smart kid I know. So I think he'll be, yeah, some of you are like, oh, that's ours. Well, I was growing up at my house. Right. Here's a picture of our daughter. She's pretty young in this picture. I think she looks a lot like me, frankly. Yeah, so we're expecting a daughter at the end of July. Daughters, man, I don't know. Lee? I don't know. I expect to have a tea party or two in my future. I expect to be spoiled or something, or to spoil her, or I don't really know. Christina, you're going to have to discipline her. I can't do it. So she's like, I'm used to that. All right. But yeah, so I mean, we're just excited to bring kids into the world. We're excited for this daughter. Man, who knows? Who knows what's going to happen once she's here? I say all the time, we live life at 100 miles an hour at our house, and we're ready to go for Sunny May to get here. So just a little anecdote about parenting, a story about Joshua. We were at my brother's house one night with a bunch of our friends, some of our family, and we're sitting around talking, solving all the world's problems, as we often do. Some of you may do this with your friends, and we're talking. Joshua's there. He's jumping around from couch to chair to couch. He's running around the room, just just having a fun old time. And he keeps coming up to me and asking me the same question. So he says, Dad, I'm pretending to ride this motorcycle through a flaming hoop. Okay, so he's, great imagination. He's riding a pretend motorcycle through a pretend flaming hoop. And he says, Dad, I really need to turn the lights off. And I said, son, there's 25 people in here. We're sitting around talking. We can't turn the lights off. Like, just keep doing what you're doing. Go play. So he goes and he comes back every 5 minutes. Dad, I need to turn the lights off. No, son. I said no. Please go play. Do your thing. You're having fun. Finally, he comes back, and I think it's a child. I must reason with him, right? So he comes back, Dad, I just really need to turn the lights off. And I said, son, you have a great imagination. Look, here you are pretending to ride a motorcycle through a flaming hoop inside a building with all these people. You got a wild imagination. Why don't you, here's my logical argument, just pretend that all the lights are off? All right? And he looks at me in front of all my friends and some of my family, and he says, Dad, I have to pretend to ride a motorcycle through a flaming hoop. I don't have to pretend to turn the lights off. So we're sitting in the living room with the lights off then, and just a great, you raise your kids to be smart, and then they smart off to you in front of everyone, and you go, I'm going to feed you some lead paint chips when we get home. I'm not going to do that, by the way. That's not recommended. Having kids is a blast. It is a lot of fun on most days, and it's almost equally as stressful as it is fun, right? It's incredibly a wonderful thing to see a version of yourself growing up, and it's incredibly frustrating to see a version of yourself growing up, and you go, all the things you don't like about yourself are amplified when you see them in your kids. It's difficult. It's stressful. But it's wonderful, and if you can't really understand that until you go through it. I think, we'd all say, a lot of us would say that raising our kids is maybe some of the things that we're most proud of. When someone comes up and says to you, your kid was so polite in class today, or that kid's so smart, you feel that in a way like you don't with anything else, right? Having kids is fun and it's stressful. You try to do it right. You read all the books that you can. You take all the advice you can. You make sure your kids eat their vegetables and do their homework and get enough rest and not too much screen time, not too much sugar, things like that. And I think most of us have the same goal in mind from day one when we have a kid. It's like, how can I keep this thing alive till tomorrow, right? You just think, how can I just keep this kid alive till tomorrow? And then you start getting pretty good at that a few years down the line, and you think, how can I keep this kid not only alive, but how can I allow this child to thrive, right? How can I allow this child to thrive in this world where there are scary things, where there are things that are out to get them? How can I protect this child in a world where things are hard? And it's a tough question, and it may be tougher in this day and age than in any other age. When I think about Joshua, when I think about Sonny Mae, I want to protect them, maybe even shelter them from the pains of the world, right? But it's not really possible to do that. It's not really possible to keep the pain of the world away from your kids. You see, in our household, with Joshua, his mom and I are no longer married. It's not something we're proud of, but it's the reality that we live in. He lives in 2 households. And that's a tough thing for him. It's a tough thing for all of us. And we like to think that it hasn't had much effect on him, but that would just be wishful thinking, right? It's not all bad. Certainly he's got a great life. He's got a mom and dad that love him and that are involved in his life. He's got a stepdad who loves him like he's his own. He's got a stepmom who challenges him and loves him like he's her own, and she challenges us every day to be better. His mom and dad are in a better place. I'm in a better place mentally and physically, and more importantly, spiritual. So there are some good things in his life, but he'll never be able to get back what he lost when his parents got divorced. That's a pain that will live with him the rest of his life that he cannot be sheltered from. And some of you, a lot of you, understand what I'm talking about here. With Sonny Mae, the pains that she will have to endure have already been set before her, right? Before she's even born, the pain that she's going to have to endure is already here. Her big brother's only going to live with her half the time, right? My wife, Christina, as some of you know, was raised in a tumultuous family environment, spent a little time in foster care, and was eventually, by the grace of God, adopted by her grandparents. Hold on a second. Who she calls mom and dad. But it wasn't all easy. It was painful. She's got a mom, a biological mom who lives in Alabama who's distant, and there's some unresolved issues in that relationship. Sonny Mae will grow up with parents who are recovering addicts, who have made a lot of bad choices in their life, and those choices are bound to make their way into her life, no matter how much we want to protect her from. When she gets older, we'll have to tell her, like we told Joshua, that Christina was pregnant before we were married, and she lost that child, and that's a pain that she lives with. And that's a pain that Sonny Mae will have to grow up with in her life. We do the best we can. You know, we're in the best place in our lives right now. We're happy, we have our good days, and we have our bad days. But we do the best we can. But no matter what we do, our children can't escape the pain of our past that is, through us, their past. We can't shelter them from it. And that's just a little bit about what we have to deal with at our house on a daily basis. Some of you can identify with some of this. Some of you can't identify with any of this, but you got your own stuff. We all have our pasts, our sin, and our pain that make their way into our kids' life, just as our parents did, right? And the hard thing is, on top of all that, on top of all of that stuff that just happens just because we're human and we live in the world, is that the world is more secular than ever, and the world is more permissive than ever. We live in a time where everything is permissible in the world. And what I mean by permissive is the world says you can be whoever you want to be. Not only can you be, but you should be just whoever you want to be. And you should do whatever you want to do. And whatever feels right to you, come out here and do that. That's what you should do, and that's who you should be. Whatever you believe, whatever you want, whatever you feel like doing, the world says everything is permissible. Come out here and do that. And that's what we are all parenting and discipling in the midst of, right? You know, I'm a firm believer that no time is really worse than any other time. I think we have different problems than certain times, but because people are sinful and because we live in a world that is sinful, problems have always existed. I do hear people say things sometimes like, that problem didn't exist in my day, and I think, well, maybe it didn't, but you had other problems. Or maybe the problem did exist, you just didn't hear about it on the radio hour or read it in the newspaper or see it on television, or now we have the internet, right? The internet, which... man, the internet has changed everything. You know, I grew up in a generation, when I was born, the internet wasn't really a thing. And then when I was growing up, the internet became a big thing. You know, so I was born in a generation of people who didn't have it and then did have it. And so my parents were kind of the first to ask the question, what effect does the internet have on my kids? Some of you didn't have a computer growing up in your house, and so you had maybe different problems. Some of you didn't have electricity in your house, so that was just a problem altogether. So, but my parents were kind of the first generation to have to ask the question, what effect does the internet have on my children? And so just a little history lesson here, 1989, you can get this from the internet, but isn't that kind of funny? A guy named Tim Berners-Lee was credited with creating the World Wide Web and the first web browser, 1989. By 1993, it was start to be noticed that people were using the internet, and so we had the great browser wars of 1994 between Microsoft Internet Explorer. Anybody remember the other one? Huh? Netscape Navigator. Any Netscape Navigator fans in here? No? Okay, see, that's Microsoft wins. They always do. And that was in 1994. You had the browser wars between Netscape Navigator and Microsoft Internet Explorer. Also in 1994, the first pornographic website was established. That didn't take long, right? Roughly 10 years after that, around 2004, we had the YouTube and the social media boom. And with that came everyone's opinions on religion, on politics, on sexuality, on everything else you can have an opinion on. We live in an age right now where you can have an opinion on anything. And I mean anything. You could sit right here now and think of the most far-fetched idea that you could ever possibly think of. You could get out your phone and you could Google it, and you could find a group of people that will confirm that belief for you. And then you could all start a Facebook group together and talk about how you believe all this belief and everybody's just so great and we love each other, and then no, don't say that or we'll block you out of the group, right? We live in these confirmation bias worlds where you can just believe any far-fetched thing that you want to believe and go on the internet and find another group of morons that believe it, and then you guys can just all live in it together, right? An example of this, and we're not going to debate this, but here's just a little example. There is now a large and growing group of people that believe that the earth is flat, right? And that we are surrounded by a firmament, which is a glass dome. Now, some people, I'm not going to laugh at this, some people believe this biblically, okay? They believe the Bible so literally that we're on four corners and we're covered by a firmament. But that's not most of these people. Most of these people saw a YouTube video that sounded pretty good, and now they have a convention. They have the people spend money and they drive a long way away and they get together and they talk about how flat the earth is. Some people fly across the globe to go to the Flat Earth Society, okay? Thank you. Now, we're not here to debate that, and if you believe that in here, I'm sorry for that. But that's just an example of something you thought you knew, right? Something you think we all agree on. The sky is blue, the earth is round, we can go to space. And here's a group of people that don't believe it. And they got together and said, it's okay that you don't believe that. And it's okay that you think NASA has been spending all this money just to lie to us for whatever far-fetched reason that you think, all right? That's just an example of what we deal with in our world today. Something as simple as the earth is round can be questioned. And the world says it's okay to question what you've always known. The world says it's okay to think what you want to think, to believe the facts that you want to believe, and that's the world that we live in. And I don't know about any of that for sure, but I know that we live in an era of permissiveness. Anything is permissible. Most of your parents maybe wouldn't even conceive to deal with the problems that parents live with today. And who knows what the parents of tomorrow are going to be dealing with. We live in a country conceived on the idea of liberty, and we've taken all the liberty we can handle. You are now free to choose to believe the facts that you want, choose your sexuality, choose your gender, choose whatever you want, whenever you feel like doing it. We live in probably the most permissive time and place in all of human history. So the question today is, how do we disciple people? How do we disciple our kids in this age of permissiveness? And well, like any good scriptural sermon has, I've got 3 points here that I think can help us along on this journey. So if you want to take some notes, we're going to just talk through 3 points today. Now, these are 3 points that I think can help us along this journey, and you don't have to agree with them, and you can come argue with me about them later if you want, but I got the microphone right now, so these are the 3 points we're going to talk about. Number 1, we can't hide those we are discipling from the world. You know, as I mentioned with my kids earlier, right? I mean, even before my daughter is born, there's already pain that's going to come to her. We can't hide our disciples from the world. If you have a Bible and you want to turn to Matthew chapter 10, I think it's always better to use Jesus' words instead of mine. And so Matthew chapter 10 in verse 16, this is in the middle of Jesus speaking to his disciples. This is one of my favorite verses in the Bible just because of the imagery, but this is Jesus speaking to his disciples in Matthew chapter 10, starting in verse 16. Look, I am sending you out as a sheep among wolves, so be wary as snakes and harmless as doves. But beware, for you will be handed over to the courts and beaten in the synagogues, and you must stand trial before governors and kings because you are my followers. This will be your opportunity to tell them about me, yes, to witness to the world. When you are arrested, don't worry about what you will say in your defense because you will be given the right words at the right time. For it won't be you doing the talking. It will be the Spirit of your Father speaking through you. Brother will betray brother to death. Father will betray their own children. And children will rise against their parents and cause them to be killed. And everyone will hate you because of your allegiance to me. But those who endure to the end will be saved. That doesn't sound like a pretty picture, does it? That doesn't sound like the 1950s Christian America that we grew up in, right? Some of you. This doesn't sound like a fun place to be. Jesus knew, in fact, he expected and predicted that our lives would be hard because we follow him. That our lives would be hard because we don't act like the world acts. And folks, we got to stop fighting against that. We got to stop believing that the world is not going to act like the world. We got to stop believing when we wake up every day that there is sunshine and birds helping us and we're going to go out and everything's going to be wonderful. We got to realize the place that we live in is a world that is ruled by sin and the father of lies. We live in a place of pain. And we got to stop ignoring that. Jesus himself said, it's going to be hard and you better get used to it and you better get ready. You see, for our kids, our homes need to be a safe space. Our homes need to be a safe space where they can come talk about the hard things that go on outside of the doors. But the world is not a safe space. Even our churches aren't a safe space. If you don't believe that, turn on the news and see some things that happen in places of worship, right? Home should be a safe space, but the world is not a safe space. To reiterate this point, I want to turn over to John chapter 17. John chapter 17 and verse 13. And the passage before is Jesus praying, talking to his disciples. This passage is Jesus praying to God for his disciples. John chapter 17, starting in verse 13. And now I am coming to you. He's talking to God here. I have told them, my disciples, many things while I was with them, so they would be filled with my joy. I have given them your word, and the world hates them because they do not belong to the world, just as I do not. I am not asking you to take them out of the world, but to keep them safe from the evil one. They are not part of this world any more than I am. Make them pure and holy by teaching them your words of truth. As you sent me into the world, I am sending them into the world. And I give myself entirely to you so that they might also be entirely yours. I am praying not only for these disciples, but also for those who will believe in me because of their testimony. Jesus' prayer here was not to take us away from the world, right? It was not to take us away from the pain. It was not to wall us off or just say, God, come now and just take them all. God has a goal to redeem and to restore the world, to heal the processes of the world. And our goal should be to help him do this. Our goal should be to join God on his goal to redeem and to restore and to heal the processes of the world. And we can't do that if our goal is to wall ourselves off from the world. We have to be in the world. We don't have to be of the world, but we got to be in it. And we've got to stop fighting against that. You know, it's not even a realistic goal to wall yourself off from it, right? Because as we've said, the pain, the sin, the hardness of the world is going to seep into your life. No matter how far you try to wall yourself off from it, it's going to find you. So you might as well be prepared for it. We must allow God to sanctify us, to make us holy as we live among the world. And we must realize that we can't hide our kids and our disciples from the world. Some of you maybe went on a job site one time or got to a job or maybe in college and you just, for whatever reason, there was somebody, maybe it was you, that just wasn't prepared for it, right? Somebody that just wasn't, and they get out there and they go, I can't believe it's really like this. And everybody else knows, but that person doesn't know. You don't want that to be your kids and your disciples when they get out in the world one day and they go, I can't believe that people act like this. Of course people act like this. We got to stop being surprised that people who don't follow Jesus act like they don't follow Jesus. All right? And when we go outside and somebody cuts us off in traffic and sends us a hand signal or something, we just got to know that that's the way the world lives. Okay? That's not that we should live like it. It's not to say that we should live like them, but we have to live among them, and we can't hide our kids and our disciples from the world. And as Jesus did in John chapter 17, we must pray for our kids, and we must pray for our disciples. Not that God take them out of the world, not that God shield them from the things, but that he protect them and help us keep them safe and holy as we live among the world, not away from it. All right, number 2, mistakes are part of the process. Some of you know I grew up, my family owns a jewelry store in town. I grew up as a jeweler's apprentice. Basically, I got to play with fire and hammer and torch and some of your jewelry, actually. So, but I grew up, kind of somewhat interested in helping with the family business, not on the business side, but on the art side and on the maintenance side. And it's really fun to melt things with fire. And, people ask all the time, hey, can I come watch you repair that? And I go, no, you can't watch me set grandma's heirloom on fire. Just be assured that it's going to be beautiful when you get it back, but you don't want to see how the sausage is made, okay? Because mistakes are part of the process. My dad had this saying that he said the first day he handed me anything dangerous, he said, a jeweler is only as good as the mistakes he fixes. That was the first thing he said to me, not, hey, don't mess that up. He said, a jeweler is only as good as the mistakes he fixes, telling me you're going to mess this up. And so he'd hand me a valuable object and a torch and a hammer, and inadvertently I would melt it into an unrecognizable blob. And he'd go, how are you going to fix it? And I would go, I don't know, you're supposed to tell me. But mistakes were part of the process. And so what I loved about that process is that my dad didn't ignore the fact that mistakes would be made. He also didn't ignore his own mistakes. And it would be impossible for him to do that because you could hear him from the next room. But if he made a mistake, you'd certainly know it. But what I love about that process is he didn't hide his own mistakes, and he didn't deny the fact that mistakes would be made. He taught me how to endure through them, that mistakes didn't end it all. There was still okay, what's next after the mistake? A jeweler is only as good as the mistakes he fixes. I believe one of the worst things that we can do for our kids and for our disciples is to try and hide our mistakes. Is to try to not own the mistakes that we make, because our kids grow up thinking that making mistakes is just not okay. That if I made a mistake, there's something wrong with me because I'm not supposed to do that. Our disciples think, I have to try really, 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 really hard not to do anything wrong. And then when I do, because I'm going to, I've got to hide it. And I've got to completely save face, and I've got to not own it. And I've just got to act like everything's okay. And when people ask me how I'm doing at church, I got to say fine because they said fine. And if they said fine, I got to be fine, because if they're fine and I'm not fine, then I'm not allowed to be here, right? And maybe, the problem with this is that it's not that our kids and our disciples don't see our mistakes, especially our kids who have a front row seat to our lives. They see our mistakes, right? It's not that they don't see them, it's just that they see us not owning them. And when we don't own our mistakes, our kids and our disciples are sent a very clear message that says, making mistakes is not okay. It teaches a pretty obvious message that our disciples and our kids learn to hide our mistakes. Maybe some of you believe this today, that when mistakes are made, we must make every effort to hide it. And you sit every day, maybe even today, with the mistakes and the guilt and the shame that comes with that. And that stuff eats you alive on the inside like a poison. Folks, mistakes are part of a life. Making mistakes are part of life. And I believe they're a crucial one. You see, pain shapes us. Maybe better than anything else in our life, pain and mistakes are the great teacher. And some of you know this to be true in your own lives. You've learned way more from your mess-ups than you ever did from your victories. Mistakes are a great teacher. No matter what it is in your business life, in your home life, in your marriage life, when you screw something up real bad, you know what to avoid the next time, right? That's a memory that sits with you. Mistakes are part of the process. So we have to allow our children and those we are discipling to make mistakes in a controlled environment, in a safe, grace-filled place where they know that if they slip up, they will be loved no matter what by us and especially by God. Yes, we must challenge them to do and to be better. And yes, we should gracefully correct sinful behavior with love. But we can't expect a standard that we ourselves cannot achieve. We can't hold our kids and our disciples to a standard that we ourselves cannot achieve. We got to release some of the pressure off their backs. We have to be open about our own mistakes, not to encourage mistakes, but to release some of the pressure so that they know I'm not having to live up to this perfect standard. that they want me to live up to. I don't have to pretend everything's okay. It's okay when stuff's not okay. One of the things I say to people pretty regularly who are going through a hard time is, it's okay to not be okay. And every time they go, no one's ever said that to me. Like there's something in this world that says we got to keep it all together and we got to pretend that we don't mess up. You know, another really awesome thing about owning our mistakes is there's a lady that wrote a book a few years ago called Daring Greatly. Her name is Brene Brown, and she did years and years and years of extensive research and data. It's a great book, and you should go and read it. It's not necessarily faith-based, although there is some faith stuff about it, but she did hard psychological research about the power of vulnerability and what it does for our relationships and what it does for our lives, and how vulnerability has long thought to be a weakness, right? Long thought that if I'm vulnerable, that's a weakness. But you try standing up here and being vulnerable. Is that a strength or is that a weakness? Does it take gumption to do that, right? And that's her whole research. Also, it allows you to connect with people. It allows you to connect with people on a really human, realistic level. Because I don't know if some of you, what I love about the way Tim preaches and the way some of our other staff, all of our other staff preaches, nobody gets up here and goes, I got this all together. When a preacher gets up somewhere or somebody gets up and does a presentation and they go, I'm really awesome and you should do things the way that I do them or you're doing them wrong, you go, ugh. I can't do that. That person is living their life awesome and I'm not awesome. But when someone gets up here and says, hey, I am messed up, you go, huh? And you lean in and you say, thank God, because I am too. When people own their mistakes, when you own your mistakes to your kids and your disciples and you say, I'm just a broken person trying to do life, they'll go, thank God, I am too. Because it allows us to believe that we aren't alone in our mess ups. We aren't alone in our mistakes. It releases a tremendous amount of pressure, and you can truly connect with people. I'm going to read a quick passage from Ephesians. You don't have to turn there. I'm just going to read one quick verse. Ephesians chapter 6 and verse 4. If you want to, you can. A lot of you probably already know this verse. And I'm going to read it to you and then maybe explain it to you in a little different context. I've been thinking about it differently lately. And again, you can come argue with me about this later, but this is how I feel like maybe it's supposed to be interpreted, at least in my mind. So Ephesians chapter 6 and verse 4, and now a word to you fathers, don't make your children angry by the way you treat them. Rather, bring them up with the discipline and instruction approved by the Lord. So this is really funny to me because one of my favorite things to do is pick on children. As I mentioned earlier, I got to shoot some with Nerf guns this weekend, and it was really fun. When my son was a toddler, he'd come up, and as they do, they toddle over, and I love to just push them over. And they look at you really frustrated, but then they come back, right? I have a niece who I am notorious for picking on, and she was the first girl in our family for years. She's incredibly cute. She got these big old beautiful eyes, and I would punch any one of you if you looked at her the wrong way. I really do love her, but I don't ever let her know that. I pick on her all the time because everybody just tells her how great she is, and I just tell her she's stinky, and she just goes, oh, so, she calls me, and she runs away, and she loves it. But I don't think that's what this verse is talking about. I don't think it's talking about frustrating your kids and picking on them. Here's what I think this verse is talking about. Bring your children up in the discipline and instruction of the Lord, but not in a way that exasperates them or frustrates them by holding them to standards they can't possibly keep. If we continue to hold people to impossible standards, to a place where there's only one way to think about it and there's only one way to do it, and if you don't do it, you're going to be wrong forever and ever, to dogmatic theology, no matter what, they will give up. Because I don't know about you, but when I'm going to be wrong no matter what, I'm just going to do what I want to do. Maybe some of you had a coach or a parent, or maybe even in your marital relationships, right? It's like, hey, do this. No, you did it the wrong way. No, do this. No, you did it the wrong way. You did this. You know what? I'm never doing the dishes ever again, right? Like, if I'm going to do it wrong every time, I'm just not going to do it. Some of you are like nudging your partner, right? And if you've been holding your disciples and your kids to a standard where they're always, always, always going to be wrong, no matter what, and to a standard they can't live up to, they are going to quit. And I promise you, whatever they're going to decide to do is the opposite of whatever you've been wanting them to do. And this is especially important because the world is saying, come out here, be who you want to be, do what you want to do, no matter what, do whatever feels good. I don't care what dad's been telling you, do what you want to do. Because you're not allowed to be a free thinker in your house. You're not allowed to feel good and do what you want in your own house. The world is saying, come out here, you can be whoever you decide you want to be. You can make mistakes. We encourage it. Make as many as you want. Live your life. Learn. Make all the mistakes you want. There's nobody correcting. There's nobody giving grace. Nobody giving love. It's just come out here and do what you want to be. If you don't release the pressure off your disciples and your kids, if you don't allow them to make mistakes and love them no matter what, they will flee from it. And they will live their lives completely the opposite of whatever you've been telling them to do. All right, third and final point. We're going to wrap up here in a second. Focus on what is gained, not what is lost. This is my good friend Dylan Riley. I want to show you this picture of him. Dylan is an incredible musician. That's him playing the banjo there. He can play really anything. It kind of makes me sick. He's a great man. He's a really kind person. He's a great dad. He's a great husband. This is my friend Dylan, except this is not what my friend Dylan looks like today. This is, where'd he go? Dylan has lost 100 or so pounds. I'm really not even sure the exact number, and I'm not sure he even knows. But other than a red beard there, he looks pretty well the same, or pretty well different. I don't know. He's just gone. He's more than half the man he used to be, less than half the man. Dylan's story is one of the most successful weight loss journeys I've ever realistically known about. There's no surgeries, no gimmicks, no real grinding it out in the gym. He just decided one day, I'm not going to eat the way I used to eat. I'm going to eat differently than I've been eating. Dylan's success story inspired my own weight loss journey. Here's a picture of us a few years ago together. He's back there on the drums, and there's me with a fuzzy hat. We both look like we've been stung by bees, and we are allergic to bees. All right, you can get that picture off there now. Great. You know, occasionally Dylan and I will sit down together. I say occasionally, but rarely do we sit down and talk about what we don't get to eat. In fact, more times than not, we annoy our wives and our friends with recipes and, hey man, did you try this thing, or have you eaten this thing, or have you tried that new substitution for flour or for sugar, and how we found ways to make cauliflower do things maybe God never even intended it to do, right? We talk about the things we get to eat more than the things we don't get to eat. And in the world that eats sugar like it's the last food on earth, you'll find Dylan at the corner of any dinner party letting his mouth water over cauliflower of all things. It would be easy in a world that allows anything, especially whatever feels good, to sit and bemoan what we're missing out on because we follow Jesus. It would be easy to look out and go, hey, they're having a lot of fun. I wonder what that would be like. The party scene in high school or college, right? Being able to experiment with chemicals or drugs or substances. Some of that stuff looks like people are having a lot of fun. Working ourselves to death in order to achieve more money, buy more things, have more stuff, do more stuff, achieve more status. Some of that looks really fun. And I don't say fun sarcastically. If it wasn't fun, if it didn't feel good, people wouldn't be spending all their time and effort to do it, right? I don't say that sarcastically, but we have to show our disciples and our kids what we have gained by following Jesus. You see, the reason my friend Dylan can let his mouth water over cauliflower is because he knows the benefits of making the healthy choice. He knows that waking up every day is easier, that playing with his kids is easier, that working with his relationship with his wife is easier when he doesn't have the weight of his unhealthy choices hanging over his head. He doesn't sit and worry about cholesterol or diabetes or heart disease. He focuses on the benefits of his new life rather than longing for the benefits of his old life. We see this in people who are sober from their addictions. That world, more than any other, is trying to pull people back into the old life. And the world will come to you and they'll say, come back, you're missing out. Don't you want to go have fun on your boat? Don't you want to go out drinking with us? Don't you want to go out and have some fun with us? You don't have any fun anymore. You're just not as fun as you used to be. And let me tell you, the world will be right about that if you're focusing on what you've lost. If you're focusing on what you're missing out on, the world will be right and you'll start to wonder. You see, when people ask me, or if they ask Dylan, if we miss eating whatever we get to, I get this question all the time. Do you ever miss it? What do you miss? No, I really don't. And I can honestly tell you that I don't miss it. I don't miss being 80 pounds overweight. I don't miss getting up here and huffing and puffing every time just standing up from the chair, right? I don't miss worrying about my health because nothing tastes good as healthy feels. And as long as you have that attitude, you will begin to crave the things that are good for you. You see, now I do get to eat the things that I want. I do crave the things that I want. It's just that my new life, the things that I want are different than the things I wanted in my old life. So when your kids ask you, when your disciples ask you, and they will, guys, they will ask you this, do you ever miss it? I have people every week that say, I'd love to follow Jesus, I'd love to do what you're doing, but I've had a lot of fun and I don't want to miss out on it. When your kids, when your disciples ask you, do you miss the old life? Do you ever wonder what you're missing out on because you follow Jesus? You can confidently say no. I don't miss stumbling around like a fool, sleeping with people I barely know and the shame that comes with it. I don't miss an empty life where I don't see my family and I work 80 hours a week and I focus on gaining as much money and as much stuff as I can. I don't miss doing whatever feels good in the moment because nothing feels as good as being rescued by Jesus Christ. No, I don't miss that old life because this new one is so much better. We need to focus on the spiritual benefits of our new life rather than the fleshly benefits of our old life. And you can only do that by the power of the Holy Spirit. The flesh will always crave what the flesh wants. You have to have a renewing of your mind and a leading of the Spirit so that you know the spiritual benefits of your new life are better than the fleshly benefits of your old life. By the power of the Spirit, I am now craving and living the way that I want, though it doesn't look like it used to. And yes, there will still be pain. There will still be trials of the world that get in your way, just like they always have. But the difference will be that you will have the creator of the world living within you and fighting for you. And that's a spiritual benefit. And so today, we're just going to, as we close, if you're tired of your old life, if you're tired of craving the things that cause you pain, you want to crave what is good, what is right, and what is holy, you can only do that through the power of the Spirit. It's time to make a decision to throw off the old life and to start a new life by putting on Jesus in the waters of baptism and choosing to follow him all the days of your life as his disciple. And there's no better time to do that than right now, than today. If you've been a follower of Jesus for some time, if you're a disciple and God has stirred something in you today, maybe you found yourself the last couple of weeks or last couple of months or last couple of years really craving the things of your old life. It's okay, we all do it. The flesh wants what the flesh wants. But if you found yourself and maybe you've had this overwhelming craving to go back to that old life, that's okay. But it's time to refocus. It's time to refocus and allow the Spirit to change your mind again, to continually change your mind, to focus on the spiritual benefits of your new life rather than longing for the fleshly benefits of your old life. If you need refocus today, if you need rededication, there'll be people around the room ready to pray with you. You can make that prayer public if you want, or it can be private. But don't waste any time doing it together as we stand and as we sing.
Your only Son goes into mine, but you have sent him from your side to walk along this guilty song and to become the Lamb of God. Your gift of love they crucified, they mocked and scorned him as he died. The humble King they named the fraud and sacrificed the Lamb of God. O Lamb of God, sweet Lamb of God, I love the holy Lamb of God. Oh, wash me in his precious blood, my Jesus Christ, the Lamb of God. I was so lost.